38 major trophies, 13 Premier League titles, 2 Champions League crowns, hundreds of elite, world-class footballers passing through the gates of Carrington over 26 relentless years. Yet, when asked to name the players who actually made him proud, Sir Alex Ferguson didn't name a full starting 11. He didn't name a squad. He named 7. Just 7. Think about that for a second. No Roy Keane, no Peter Schmeichel, no Hugh Ferdinand, no Nemanja Vidic. The men who literally bled on the pitch to build his empire, left out in the cold, just gone. Bye-bye. Now ask yourself the real question. Why would the most ruthlessly successful manager in sports history ignore the destroyers who won him the trophies and choose 7 very specific names instead? Because modern football wants you to believe it's all about market value, corporate branding, and tactical heat maps. FIFA wants you staring at TV revenue packages while suit-wearing bureaucrats turn the game into a sanitized cash machine. But Alex Ferguson wasn't building a brand. He was building an army. And inside that army, success wasn't measured by how many shirts you sold in Asia. It was measured by something far more dangerous to the football establishment. Absolute, unquestioned loyalty. Let's drop back to November 1992. Manchester United hadn't won a league title in 25 years. The pressure on Ferguson was suffocating. The board was restless. The press was sharpening their knives. And the media establishment was ready to write him off as another Scottish failure. Then came the spark. Eric Cantona. Ferguson didn't just sign a striker. He signed an atomic bomb wrapped in an upturned collar. Before Cantona, United played with fear. Cantona walked into Old Trafford like he owned the place, puffing his chest out and demanding the ball when everyone else was hiding. He brought a terrifying, unshakable belief that infected the entire dressing room. And then came Selhurst Park, January 1995. A red card, a hostile crowd, an abusive fan leaning over the barrier. Cantona didn't look at the referee. He didn't look at the cameras. He launched a flying kung fu kick straight into the chest of the abuse. The media went into absolute meltdown. The English FA wanted him banned for life. The board wanted his contract terminated on the spot to save corporate face. Broadcasters were running moral outrage segments on repeat. The establishment smelled blood in the water. They wanted Cantona destroyed to protect the reputation of the game. What did Alex Ferguson do? Did he throw his star player under the bus to save his own neck? Not a chance. While the suits in London were preparing their execution order, Ferguson rode a scooter through the streets of Paris just to meet Cantona in secret. He sat with him in a dimly lit restaurant, ignored the chaos, and told him one simple thing. You stay with me and we fight them together. That was the moment the dynasty was forged. Ferguson didn't care about PR. He didn't care about sponsorship deals. He protected Cantona because Cantona gave United their soul. When Cantona returned from his 8-month ban, he didn't just play. He dragged United to another double. Ferguson was proud of Cantona not because he was flawless, but because he was a rebel who stood up when the world told him to bow. Cantona showed Ferguson that to build something unshakable, you need players who refuse to follow the script written by the authorities. But if Cantona was the spark that lit the fire, Ferguson knew he couldn't survive on chaos alone. He needed a foundation that couldn't be bought with oil money or FIFA TV packages. Enter Ryan Giggs and Paul Scholes. Look at the modern game right now. Players change clubs like they change boots. Agents pull strings, leak stories to the press, and fabricate transfer drama just to squeeze another 50 grand a week out of desperate owners. Loyalty in modern football is an illusion engineered by marketing teams. Ryan Giggs spent 24 years at Manchester United. Paul Scholes spent 20. To be fair for a second, Giggs had the physical tools to play for any superclub on earth. Real Madrid wanted him. Juventus chased him when Serie A was the undisputed financial capital of football. They offered blank checks. They promised him lifestyle, money, and international glamour. Giggs stayed. Scholes didn't even have an agent. Think about that in today's era of bloated agencies and billionaire reps. Scholes would sign whatever contract Ferguson put in front of him, walk out of the office, and go play head tennis against a brick wall. Ferguson wasn't just proud of their talent. He was proud of their refusal to be corrupted by the circus surrounding them. Scholes was the ultimate anti-superstar. In an era where football was turning into a Hollywood red carpet, Scholes hated interviews. He hated sponsorships. He hated the noise. You had legendary figures from across Europe, men like Zinedine Zidane, Xavi, and Andrea Pirlo, publicly stating that Scholes was the greatest midfielder of their generation. Zidane famously said, "My toughest opponent? Scholes of Manchester. He is the complete midfielder." Yet Scholes walked out of training every day in a muddy tracksuit, drove home, and didn't give a damn about the hype machine. Ferguson loved that, because in Scholes and Giggs, he had two elite assassins who were completely immune to the poison of modern fame. They proved that you didn't need to sell out to be global royalty. They were the engine room of a machine that won 13 league titles while remaining untouchable to outside noise. Then came the year 2003, and with it, the ultimate test of Ferguson's ability to shape a human being from scratch. Cristiano Ronaldo arrived in Manchester as an 18-year-old kid from Sporting CP. He had spaghetti hair, braces, and a habit of doing 5 step-overs when a simple pass was wide open. Opponents laughed at him. Premier League defenders tried to kick him off the park. The English press called him a show pony, a diver, a theatrical fraud who wasn't built for real football. They thought he was soft. Ferguson knew better. Ferguson didn't try to strip away Ronaldo's flair. He calibrated it. He let the senior players like Roy Keane and Rio Ferdinand smash Ronaldo in training to harden his mind, while acting as his personal guardian behind closed doors. It wasn't a standard player-manager dynamic. It was a father-son relationship forged in high-pressure combat. When Ronaldo's father fell gravely ill in 2005, United were facing critical Champions League fixtures. Ronaldo walked into Ferguson's office, terrified to ask for leave. Ferguson didn't check the fixture list. He didn't look at the points tally. He looked Ronaldo in the eye and said, "Football means nothing compared to your father. Go." That single line built an unbreakable bond of loyalty. Ronaldo didn't just want to win games anymore. He wanted to destroy the world for Alex Ferguson. Over the next 3 years, Ronaldo evolved from a raw, insecure teenager into a terrifying physical specimen. A goal-scoring machine who swept the Ballon d'Or, the Premier League, and the Champions League in 2008. When Real Madrid came knocking in 2009 with a world record fee, Ferguson knew he couldn't stop the boy's childhood dream forever. But notice how it was handled. No ugly strike. No toxic media leaks. Ronaldo gave Ferguson one final, legendary season before leaving with his manager's blessing. Years later, when Ronaldo lifted the European Championship trophy with Portugal in 2016, he didn't run straight to the press or the VIP boxes filled with corrupt UEFA suits. He walked down the stairs, spotted Ferguson waiting in the stands, and fell into his arms. That is what Ferguson meant by pride. It wasn't just about shaping a player. It was about molding an 18-year-old kid into a world-conquering man. Which brings us to the 5th name on Sir Alex's list. And this is where the narrative takes a sharp, uncomfortable turn. David Beckham. If you listen to the revisionist history pushed by casual fans, you'd think Ferguson hated David Beckham by the end of his career. You've seen the headlines. You know the story of February 2003, the boot-kicking incident in the Old Trafford dressing room after an FA Cup defeat to Arsenal. A flying football boot, kicked in a blind fit of rage by Ferguson, striking Beckham right above the eye, leaving him needing stitches. The pictures hit the front pages of every newspaper in the UK the next morning. Flashbulbs went off everywhere. The media circus went nuclear. To the outside world, it looked like the end of the line. A toxic fallout between a tyrannical manager and a pop culture megastar. Let's look at what was actually happening beneath the surface. Ferguson saw Beckham changing. He saw him morphing from a hyper-focused academy lad who stayed late every single day to practice free kicks, into a global celebrity icon managed by publicists, pop music teams, and corporate sponsors. Ferguson was terrified that the entertainment industry was swallowing one of the purest talents in English football history. He wasn't mad at Beckham the player. He was fighting a war against the media machine that was trying to claim ownership over his players' focus. Ferguson believed that the second a player thought he was bigger than the manager, and bigger than the club, the institution would crumble. So Beckham was sold to Real Madrid in the summer of 2003. Cold, calculated, business, just gone. Bye-bye. For years, the press tried to frame them as bitter enemies. They wanted a public feud to feed the clickbait cycle. But let's look at the facts. When Ferguson retired in 2013, he didn't bury Beckham. He put him on the shortlist of the 7 players who made him proud. Why? Because Ferguson looked past the pop star haircuts, the paparazzi cameras, and the commercial circus. He remembered the boy who used to take hundreds of free kicks every single afternoon until his boots wore out. He remembered a player whose work rate on the right wing was unmatched by almost anyone in Europe. Even at the absolute height of his celebrity, Beckham never slacked off on the pitch. He ran until his lungs gave out. Ferguson recognized that underneath the global brand, Beckham possessed a relentless, working-class work ethic that couldn't be broken. The boot incident wasn't hatred. It was a battle for a player's soul. And when the dust settled, Ferguson gave credit where credit was due. Now, let's step back for a second and examine the pattern. Cantona, Giggs, Scholes, Ronaldo, Beckham. 5 names down. Notice something missing? Where are the enforcers? Where is the steel that made Manchester United terrifying to step onto the pitch against? Where is Roy Keane? This is where the expose really hits. Roy Keane was the ultimate Ferguson player on paper. He was the commander on the pitch. The man who dragged Manchester United through the 1999 Champions League semi-final against Juventus in Turin, taking a yellow card that he knew would rule him out of the final, and playing like a possessed demon anyway to ensure his team made it to Barcelona. Ferguson himself wrote in his autobiography that Keane's performance in Turin was the most selfless display of football he had ever witnessed. So how in the world does a player who sacrificed his own dream for the team get excluded from Ferguson's ultimate list of pride? Let's break down the truth that FIFA and mainstream sports commentary won't tell you. The fallout between Ferguson and Keane in 2005 wasn't just an argument over tactics. It was an ideological war for absolute control. Keane was a purist. He hated lazy standards, he hated weak teammates, and he hated corporate fluff. But Keane crossed the ultimate boundary. He took his war to MUTV, the club's official media channel. After a 4-1 humiliating defeat to Middlesbrough in October 2005, Keane went on an unedited tirade. He shredded his own teammates. He ripped into Rio Ferdinand's defending, questioned Darren Fletcher's presence at the club, and slammed the young players for being soft and obsessed with luxury cars. The tape was so explosive that Ferguson ordered it to be destroyed before it could air to the public. Ferguson called a meeting in his office. Keane didn't back down. He confronted Ferguson in front of the assistant manager, Carlos Queiroz, and the argument descended into verbal warfare. Ferguson knew he had a choice. If he let Keane publicly destroy the morale of the young players he was trying to build his next team around, his authority was dead. The dressing room would split into factions. Within days, Roy Keane's contract was ripped up. Tears were shed in the office. 12 years of legendary service wiped out in a single afternoon. Just gone. Bye-bye. When Ferguson omitted Keane from his list of players who made him proud, it wasn't because he forgot Turin in 1999. It was because Ferguson could never forgive a player who endangered the collective unity of the culture he built. To Ferguson, pride wasn't just about brave performances on the pitch. It was about respecting the sanctity of the family he created. Keane burned the house down on his way out, and Ferguson held that grudge to his core. Which brings us to the 6th player on the list. A man who sat on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Roy Keane. Wayne Rooney. When Wayne Rooney burst onto the scene as an 18-year-old street fighter from Croxteth, he was a force of nature. He played football like he'd just jumped out of a pub brawl and put on a pair of boots. Raw power, explosive aggression, and a streetwise tactical intelligence that made defenders look foolish. Ferguson bought him from Everton in 2004 for £27 million. An astronomical fee for a teenager at the time. Their relationship was far from smooth. Rooney wasn't like Giggs or Scholes. He wasn't quiet. He challenged Ferguson. He argued on the pitch. In 2010, Rooney did the unthinkable. He released a public statement questioning Manchester United's ambition and threatening to leave for crosstown rivals Manchester City. The football world stopped. The media was practically drooling at the prospect of Ferguson's empire falling apart from the inside. To be fair for a second, Ferguson was furious. He held a legendary press conference, looking visibly wounded, playing the hurt father figure to perfection in front of the world's media. He manipulated the entire narrative, forcing Rooney into a corner where the player had no choice but to back down, apologize, and sign a new contract. Yet despite 2 separate transfer requests across 9 years, despite shouting matches on the touchline, Ferguson named Wayne Rooney as one of the 7. Why? Because Rooney did something almost no superstar striker in modern history has ever done. He sacrificed his own personal glory for the benefit of the team. When Ronaldo was at United, Rooney willingly shifted out to the left wing, tracking back to defend fullback so Ronaldo could stay up front and score the headlines. When Robin van Persie arrived in 2012, Rooney dropped into midfield to play provider. He didn't care about his personal brand. He didn't care about his ego. He went on to become Manchester United's all-time record goalscorer with 253 goals, surpassing Sir Bobby Charlton's legendary record. Ferguson respected the raw, street fighter mentality that Rooney brought every single time he pulled on the red shirt. Rooney was volatile, but when the whistle blew, he was an absolute warrior. And that brings us to the 7th and final name, the biggest curveball of them all. It wasn't Ruud van Nistelrooy, who scored goals at a rate that terrified European defenses but ultimately complained too much about service. It wasn't Robin van Persie, who delivered the 20th league title with a single season of pure brilliance. It was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Think about the modern footballer for a minute. Player empowerment is at an all-time high. If a top striker gets benched for 2 games in a row, their agent is instantly leaking stories to journalists, demanding transfers, and creating toxic drama inside the squad. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer spent years sitting on the bench at Old Trafford. He was the ultimate super sub, but he didn't sit there sulking or scrolling on his phone. Solskjaer sat on the bench with a notebook and a sharp mind. He analyzed opposition defenders, studying their weaknesses, watching how their legs got heavy in the 70th minute, waiting for the exact moment Ferguson would call his name. May 26, 1999.
Camp Nou, Barcelona.
The Champions League final against Bayern Munich. United are down 1-0 in injury time. The trophy is slipping away. The Bayern Munich staff are already tying red ribbons to the cup. Teddy Sheringham scores the equalizer in the 91st minute. The stadium explodes. But Ferguson doesn't want extra time. He wants the killer blow. Minute 93. A corner kick from David Beckham. Flighted into the box. Headed down by Sheringham. And there is Solskjaer, sticking out a leg at the back post, poking the ball into the top roof of the net. The greatest comeback in European football history. The treble secured. Ferguson was proud of Solskjaer not just for that iconic goal, but for his complete selflessness. Solskjaer accepted his role for the greater good of the club. He proved that you don't need to be the main star every week to leave a legacy that lives forever. So let's pull back the curtain and look at the whole picture. Eric Cantona, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes,
Cristiano Ronaldo.
David Beckham, Wayne Rooney,
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Look at what connects these 7 men. It wasn't just raw talent. It wasn't tactical perfection. It wasn't even the number of medals around their necks. What connected them was that every single one of them, in their own unique way, represented the core principles of the culture Ferguson spent 26 years building. Cantona brought the swagger and defiance against the establishment. Giggs and Scholes brought the unshakable loyalty that modern money couldn't buy. Ronaldo brought the ruthless, obsessive work ethic to turn potential into greatness. Beckham brought the unstoppable grit beneath the media storm. Rooney brought the street fighting soul. And Solskjaer brought the ultimate selflessness. Notice who is missing from that list again. Roy Keane, Peter Schmeichel, Jaap Stam,
Ruud van Nistelrooy. Hugh Ferdinand.
These were iconic, legendary players who won dozens of trophies under Ferguson. But they were men who, at one point or another, put their own ego, their own voice, or their own demands ahead of the collective machine. And to Sir Alex Ferguson, that was the ultimate sin. The modern sports media wants to convince you that success is just a mathematical equation. They want you to think it's about tactical algorithms, transfer expenditures, and corporate strategies designed in boardroom meetings by suit-wearing executives who have never kicked a ball in their lives. They want to turn the World Cup and club football into a sterile, predictable product where the richest institutions always win, and where players are just commercial assets moving on a balance sheet. Sir Alex Ferguson proved that the entire corporate model is a lie. He didn't win for nearly 3 decades because he had the biggest budget. He won because he understood the human soul better than anyone who ever stood in a dugout. He built an empire based on trust, discipline, and an absolute refusal to break under external pressure. Trophies get covered in dust. Records eventually get broken by the next generation of multi-million-dollar squads. But the characters Ferguson forged inside that Old Trafford dressing room, they defined an entire era of human achievement. He wasn't proud of the 38 pieces of silver sitting in the cabinet at Old Trafford. Silver is cold. Silver doesn't fight for you when you're 1-0 down in injury time in Barcelona. He was proud of the 7 men who absorbed his mindset, took on his fighting spirit, and stood with him against the world. Which brings us to the real question you need to ask yourself today. Was Sir Alex Ferguson right to leave men like Roy Keane off his ultimate list? Was he being a cold, vindictive tyrant holding onto old grudges? Or was he completely justified in protecting the sanctity of the culture he built above all else? Did Keane's sacrifice in Turin earn him a spot that Ferguson's pride unfairly denied him? Drop your take and your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. A like genuinely helps this channel stand up against the algorithm more than you'd think. And hit that subscribe button right now if you want real, unfiltered coverage of the game that digs deep beneath the sanitized PR narratives. Trust me, this won't be the last time we expose what really happens behind closed doors in elite football. Football at this scale is never just a tournament. It's a moment in time. I'll see you in the next one.